number one tip that you want to avoid when wholesaling in real estate.
We have real estate investors, approach us to say, oh, I want to assign the deal. And then lo and behold, we're surprised that there's no wording that allows for an assignment. The key, I think, to take from this is you need to actually have the right to be able to do so. If you don't have that right listed in your agreement of purchase and sale, that offer to purchase, then the only way to assign at that point would be to have
What's going on YouTube? It's Rebecca Lynn Matheson here. Welcome to the Canadian Real Estate Channel. And today we're joined by Ryan Carson from Carson Law. And we're going to be breaking down the number one tip that you want to avoid when wholesaling in real estate. So let's first of all, Ryan, just break down what even is wholesaling and some of the different investing strategies that investors are applying right now, all the way from flipping to burring to wholesaling. Let's kind of break all of that down and kind of where wholesaling lands on that spectrum.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. And thanks for having me, guys, to another exciting episode here. So wholesaling is kind of the real estate investor term that gets thrown around a lot for what we would call in the legal world an assignment. So an assignment transaction is where you have three parties. So you'll have, in the context of a real estate deal, you'll have the ultimate homeowner on the one hand. So they're the seller throughout the whole process. Then you have buyer number one, who comes along and offers, like normal, to acquire a property from that homeowner. But then, so that deal gets completed or signed up on. And then buyer number one is actually a wholesaler. They're a wholesaler investor. They find a new buyer. So buyer number two comes along and buyer number two buys the deal from buyer number one. So essentially buyer number one becomes what is called the assignor, and buyer number two becomes what's known as the assignee or end purchaser, basically. So the way that all works is seller sells to buyer number one. Buyer number one becomes the assignor and assigns it to a new buyer, buyer number two. Buyer number two acquires on the closing date agreed to with the seller the property. So if we put some names and faces with this, let's say Peter, our cameraman, he is the seller. He's going to sell his property to you, Rebecca, as buyer number one for $300,000. And it's a completely firm and signed real estate agreement of purchase and sale. You put into your agreement the right and ability to assign with some other best practice wording to protect yourself in the assignment of the deal. Then I come along and I know you as a wholesaler and I say, hey, Rebecca, what deals do you have that are good? I want to buy some from you. You basically say, hey, I've got one here. And we look over the deal and we enter into an assignment agreement of purchase, which has me enter in to take over your rights and I buy the property from Peter. And then the net result is I have to pay you whatever our agreed upon assignment fee is on the day of closing, and I have to pay Peter whatever original purchase price was agreed to buy from Peter.
Got it. And that assignment fee is almost like a finder's fee, like, hey, you have this contract, I'll pay you this much if I can just take over that contract instead of having you close on the deal.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, that's a common way of looking at it. Finder's fee, referral fee, I guess it can be whatever kind of fee you want to denote it as. But yes, that's where obviously wholesalers, that's their sweet spot. That's their bread and butter. Obviously the better the price from their standpoint with, in my example, Peter, the seller, it means there can be more lift, obviously, with Ryan, in my example, the second buyer, right? And so then your profit margin, if you want to use that word, increases for you, the wholesaler real estate investor.
And assignments actually happen quite a lot in like development as well, right? So you
Yep.
might have a builder that actually goes in and they sell the property or the project prior to even starting the build. And then during that time, that project appreciates. So let's do the reverse of that. So Rebecca, the builder, builds the home, they buy the lot, and they start on the project. I'm going to pre-sale to Ryan, who's going to be locked in legal binding contract to the price and terms that were agreed upon. But Ryan, if he so chooses, after the project begins, maybe it's closer to finishing, maybe he has another opportunity or another investment that he wants to take on, or just decides that the market has appreciated enough by that time that he decides to assign that contract to another person that wants to take over. Then he would have the other person pay him that assignment fee, and he still is a part of that transaction all the way to the end, but is that kind of third party. So that is happening all the time with builders as well as just regular real estate transactions.
Yeah, you're quite right there, Rebecca. Lots of land developers have several different, whether they're related companies that they assign, from corp to corp on, or it could be a completely arm's length, company that they end up doing an assignment on. So it is very common, and it's a strategy a lot of people who are in sort of the real estate investment world of, land development and building will and have used for many years. And I think it's just in the last couple years really become something that non-builders, people like you and I, as real estate investors, have started to realize they can do sort of in the resale market, right? So builders are very used to it because it's because builders are in the business of, real estate. So it's something that's just a common practice for them, and it makes sense to them, and they can understand it. I think the general public, because assignments are much newer on the resale front, especially related to people's purchase and sales and assignments of their personal properties, whether it's a personal home that they actually live in or it's a real estate investment property for them. It's not as widely known, so it's sometimes that's where people can be leery or worried about it, right? But it's completely there's nothing illegal about it, that's for sure, and it's something that's been commonly used by others in real estate business for a long time.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of strategies, so an investor like myself who's looking at multiple properties on a regular basis, maybe I come across some that I'd like to take down myself. Maybe I come across a project that I want to assign to another person. From that perspective, what is the main things that if an investor was looking at taking down a project, but as the closing date came closer, they actually found another one that they liked better, and maybe they want to assign that original agreement that they had for property number one so that they can instead buy property number two and just assign that property number one to somebody else? What would be the main thing that they want to ensure to make that go smoothly that they do? Or what are some mistakes that somebody should might make, or how can they avoid really making mistakes during that transaction?
Yeah, I know, it's a great question. So, I mean, I think the first thing, if you're a real estate investor or if you're somebody who just honestly thinks they might need to assign a deal, like you just mentioned, there was deal number one, and then another deal number two came along that they could only close on one of the deals, and they wanted to close on deal number two instead of deal number one. I think putting wording in your agreement, your original offer to purchase, that gives you the ability to assign is important, right? So lots of times we have real estate investors, approach us to say, oh, I want to assign the deal. And we were like, okay, that's fine. Like, let's take a look at your offer to purchase here and your firm agreement of purchase and sale. And then lo and behold, we're surprised that there's no wording that allows for an assignment. So, I mean, there's definitely different tips and strategies and sort of best practice wording that, we might, recommend or suggest. And so if anybody's watching and they'd like to know, just email me and I'm happy to kind of walk you through some, standard vernacular and terms that you could put in the deal. But the key, I think, to take from this is you need to actually have the right to be able to do so. If you don't have that right listed in your agreement of purchase and sale, that offer to purchase, then the only way to assign at that point would be to have an amendment to the agreement to do the assignment. And then the problem is you need the other party, the seller, to agree to it. Whereas if in the offer that the seller accepts, you already had the wording in there that gives you the right to assign. Now you don't need that amendment. Now you don't need the seller to agree because they already did by accepting the deal. So it allows you to more conveniently and effectively, I guess, whether you're a wholesaler and you are trying to actively shop it, or the situation that you brought up, Rebecca, where you thought you were going to maybe try to do both deals, but turns out you can only do the one deal and not both deals. That assignment wording and that being written in your offer to purchase is going to protect you, so that whether you want to wholesale it, or whether you run into a stumbling block and you have to assign one of your deals because you can only do one, not two. Having that wording in there is just a good practice to have, whether you're going to actively assign or not.
Absolutely. And then something else that you mentioned there is that communication piece with the seller. So if that clause isn't in there, so it sounds like as an investor, if you are offering on multiple properties, having some sort of clause in there can just save you future headaches if you are planning to look at multiple exit strategies in the project. But that communication with the seller is a really important element here. So your intentions and what you plan to do, communicating that effectively. Do you have any tips and tricks on that?
Yeah, I think you've hit bang on there. I mean, we are finding, and we kind of talked offline about this. We are finding some wholesaler clients that we have are getting a bit of pushback, mostly from sellers, and it seems that the issue might be coming from this concept of there might not have been full transparency or like honesty between the seller and the wholesaler. And so I think the important thing is to make it fully transparent. And if you can get that transparency covered in writing, like whether it's email communications or even written as a term within your offer to purchase or in some other separate acknowledgement document, that just says the seller is fully aware, that you're a real estate investor, you're making an offer to them. However, you will be looking to assign and wholesale the deal to another party who will ultimately close on all the terms you've agreed to as the wholesaler. And I think if you have that kind of acknowledgement and written communication with the seller, that just shows the transparency of like what you're trying to do. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if they are willing and agreeing to accept, and I think in my example, I said $300,000, and then you can wholesale it later to the ultimate buyer number two for 350. As long as they get their 300 and they're happy with that 300, then there shouldn't be a problem, right? I think where we've seen some issues crop up is, well, number one, people don't have the right to assign. That's a problem. But then number two, even with a really well-written contract on assignment agreements, it seems like whether some sellers don't understand what an assignment is, or they feel like they've been, maybe like cheated on the deal. It's just this transparency of being aware, just making everybody aware that, hey, we're going to make sure whoever buys this from you pays you the amount you're happy with. And if we make some money on this as well, you're okay with that. And I think if there was a written, path of communication of that, or even a signed separate acknowledgement that that's taken place, I think that would really help a lot of wholesalers that are getting into this business or already in the business and kind of scaling. Because I think a pattern I'm seeing out there is people learning about assignments like while the deal's happening and as it's leading up to closing, and they feel like, oh, I didn't actually understand this, now I understand it, and I feel like I could cancel this deal and try to sell it on the market for more money because you're gonna have it assigned for an extra 50K, so why don't I just put it on the market for 350 now, right? And the problem is the reason you're able to get 350 for it is because you're an astute real estate business investor and you know how to value the property and who will buy it, right? It's probably that the general public might not pay 350 for it. Otherwise, they would have sold it for 350, right? That might be the other thing that these sellers just need a bit of transparency on as well.
Definitely appreciate that. Is there any other tips and tricks that you have for people getting into wholesaling?
You mean, I would say work with a real estate lawyer who is familiar with investor strategies. So at Carson Law, we've got a couple lawyers on staff, including myself. We're real estate investors as well. So we're very, very familiar with all the different platforms, including assignments and wholesaling. I think a lot of people as well that are kind of getting nervous on wholesales or assignments are getting information from lawyers possibly who actually don't really know a lot about assignments themselves. And I think that's part of the problem. So if you can help it at all as well, if you can encourage the seller to use a real estate like investor lawyer, somebody who's familiar with assignments as opposed to like going to their old lawyer who does family law. Just like I wouldn't give family law advice as a real estate lawyer. Lawyers that are not familiar with real estate investment platforms probably don't make the greatest real estate lawyers for the platform. So I think making sure where you can help it that the parties are dealing with real estate lawyers and specifically real estate lawyers familiar with wholesaling.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, definitely appreciate the information just all about real estate wholesaling and breaking down some of those different scenarios and strategies on where it could go wrong or right in the transaction. So guys, make sure that if you enjoyed today's video or have any questions, toss them into the comment section below and subscribe to the Canadian Real Estate channel for more great tips and tricks on how you can really build your real estate investing portfolio for success and all sorts of different strategies on how you can BRRRR, flip, wholesale, take down Airbnbs and more. So make sure that you guys tune in, like, and comment down below for more great videos like these. Ryan, thanks again for coming onto the channel today. And where can people find you?
You can go to our website, carsonlaw.ca, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have, and all my contact details are there. But best way to reach me is email ryan@carsonlaw.ca.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Thanks.